All three of these MPPT controllers feed the same one battery. Now we're going to get a little bit high tech. So first, I want you to notice that the MPPT controller on the left is reading 16.3 and the other two are reading 15.9 volts. Now, Renogy MPPTs are famous for having really poor voltage readouts, but that's just too large of a difference at 0.4 volts. And right now there is a fairly heavy current load or recharge rate, so 20 amps. It turns out it's all coming from that one same MPPT controller. So that particular set of panels is busy charging 20 amps. It's like maxing out this 20 amp MPPT, and the others are producing like 8 amps and half an amp. So almost nothing coming from those other panels. They're busy recharging the lead acid batteries or something. So when I look at this, the fact that the voltage is much higher means there must be a significant IR drop along this wire. This is 8-gauge wire. If I feel this, it's warm. So what's going on? So I'm gonna have this infrared camera here. I can see here that those MPPTs are not too hot, but that one is hot. I also can see that those wires are hot, but the wire below the fuse is not hot, only the wire out of the MPPT. So there's a lot of, there's a couple things could be happening. Definitely the wires are hot, but it's probably just heat being generated inside the MPPT that is losses, and maybe not so much an IR drop. However, that's not consistent with the fact that the voltage reading is so different. So this is kind of a tricky debug, kind of unclear what's happening. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to basically change the wire to see if it makes a difference by adding a sleeve on it. That is a Ferrules. So I'm going to see if we can improve the connection, see if there's like a bad connection in that wire, creating power loss in the wire from a bad connection. And how I'm going to do that is by crimping Ferrules. So I'm going to take the risk of messing with a working system. So this is the 8-gauge Ferrules. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to crimp it with a hydraulic crimper. Let's see how that goes. This is currently set for 6-gauge. Just need to find the 8-gauge pieces. It's actually in these are the size mm4. This is kind of small. This might be the right size though for this. Okay, I might have to change the jaws. This looks like it might be the right size, or it might be a little too small. We have to go back up to the 6. Just look here. Okay, I can see here that it's just about half the size of the Ferrules, so I'm going to go for that. Next, I'm going to have to de-energize it and then disconnect the wire. Okay, to de-energize it, I've got a switch here for turning off the panels for that particular set. So this is now showing a little moon symbol here because I've turned off the source because it thinks it's nighttime. But really, I just shut down the panels. And now, there's not much I can do because I don't have a switch to the battery. So I'm going to have to disconnect this. So what I'm going to do is disconnect positive first. Wire. It's basically just it can be frayed easily because it's just a cut wire and stripped wire, so it really needs these ferrules. This is a 8 gauge, so this ferrule should work for it. This wire has been used a lot, so it's kind of frayed on the end. I'm tempted to actually maybe cut and re-strip. Okay. I have some sticking out from the end, which I'm actually going to accept. And now, I'm going to crimp it. Looks like it's actually not small enough. I have to use a smaller size blades. I have to go down to my number 4. Now it's crimping it. I'm going to try to line up the crimp. So it's aesthetically pleasing. It's not necessary, but I'm just going to do it. Okay, now it's been crimped. I could possibly add some heat shrink to it, but I'm going to skip that for now. Okay, I have already crimped the red wire. I'm now going to crimp the black wire, which I have removed between the A&L fuse and the MPPT controller. And I'm going to thread the copper into the ferrule and make sure it works its way down so that all the copper strands are in there. You can see here that the ferrule is just a little bit longer than the wire, which I don't like, so I'm going to just push it in as much as I can. And now I'm going to crimp it. You want the wire to be flush or slightly longer than the ferrule to get the best crimp. Okay, I'm now going to finish the crimp. It's crimped. That's not coming off. I'm now going to reinsert this And hopefully this will make sure that the electrical connection is strong and make sure there's no frayed wire that might short circuit between the high power battery leads. Although there is a fuse, but still prefer to have additional protection. This fuse is unnecessary, it's excessive. We could be, I could just rely on a distributor fuse, but this is just an extra fuse here on the negative. Normally you have just fuses on the positive only. So did the crimping of Ferrules make a difference? I'm not sure if it did. That unit is still a little hotter than the others, but I think it's just charging more because it's has a dedicated set of panels. 7 amps, no amps, and 140 milliamps. But I did discover that on this unit, which was giving less charge than I was expecting, one of the wires, this one, was actually a little loose, and that explains why it wasn't charging the battery as much. So putting the crimp on there, make sure that it stays good, because that's the purpose of a crimp. It keeps the wires from fraying, but it also improves the contact with the set screws and clamps. So crimps are worth it, even if all it does is just make sure that your wires are connected well. So after I installed the Ferrule, I'm noticing I'm now getting 24 amps through that charger. So it's now actually charging the batteries. One of the reasons why you need to add Ferrules to wires, especially if they're multi-stranded soft wire like these battery cables, is that they will loosen over time just naturally. And that's because of something called the diurnal cycle. And what the diurnal cycle is, at night it's a little cooler and during the day it's a little warmer. So your system will undergo thermal cycles once per day. And so after a year, when I first built that, they were all tight and everything was perfect. I didn't touch them. I mean, maybe it got bumped a little bit here and there, but still it was really cranked down. The cable became loose just by itself over a period of a year probably because of the diurnal cycles. Even though this is inside in a garage, it still would have some thermal cycles and changes based on things like the day-night cycle. So what happens is, especially with you have a multi-stranded soft wire, is that the individual copper strands will shift slightly, and even small microscopic shifting in the copper strands will cause them to loosen, because just shift a small circle a little bit and it changes how much of it is in a certain spot. So stranded wire may loosen itself even if it was cranked down tight. And I noticed that when I pulled it out, it had definitely been crushed really strongly by the screws and the clamp, but that didn't help any. It still had become loose. So you need Ferrules because those will help hold multi-stranded soft wire in place, and will also keep the wires from shifting around and loosening the grip. So add Ferrules to your soft wires to make sure that they don't loosen by themselves over time. And as they loosen, the connection became poor, and that one was no longer charging the battery. But also in the infrared camera imagery early on, one of those wires is a little warmer, and that's because when you have a loose connection, there's high resistance there, and that generates a lot of heat. And you can also get electrical fires that way too. So without a ferrule, diurnal cycles can jeopardize your wiring.